At Tucson International Airport, Morgan Air Flight 192, a passenger jet bound for Orlando, rolled down taxiway Alpha for a departure on runway 30. On board, 179 passengers and 6 crew. Inside the cockpit, Captain Byron Ritchie and First Officer Martin Monroe ran through their checklists for the late afternoon flight. The air inside was in stark contrast to the stifling 102-degree heat outside, part of a high-pressure system covering much of the southern United States in what meteorologists were calling a blistering heat dome. Making preparations for takeoff, First Officer Monroe reviewed the data received through the aircraft's flight performance system, providing him the necessary flaps, throttle settings, and speed for takeoff based on the latest weather information.
Morgan 192, Tucson Tower, RNAV to Wildcat, cleared for takeoff runway 30.
RNAV to Wildcat, cleared for takeoff runway 30. Morgan 192. Check thrust.
Thrust set.
82.5%. 100 knots.
Checks.
V1, rotate. Pull her up.
I'm pulling, she won't climb.
Come on, climb, climb!
A commuter on nearby Interstate 19 later described seeing the airline struggle to lift, like, quote, someone drowning and fighting to get to the surface. At 170 miles per hour, the lumbering aircraft snapped light poles and power lines before clipping the roof of an Arizona Air National Guard hangar. The doomed flight then rolled and slammed into the ground, spreading flaming debris across East Valencia Road, flattening cars, setting 2 manufacturing buildings alight, killing 12 on the ground and injuring dozens. Of the 185 souls aboard Flight 192, only 34 survived. As first responders raced to the scene, what no one knew in the moment, yet what the world would soon witness, was that Flight 192 was just the first crash in what would become one of the darkest days in US aviation history. In Moscow, a day prior to the crash of Flight 192, Russian President Dmitry Kozak held a meeting with his closest advisors. Kozak was near apoplectic over NATO's recent air and missile attack on bridges, railways, and logistics centers deep inside Russia itself, news and video of which rippled across the country. Some of Kozak's most hardcore supporters, including more than a few media pundits, were calling for a severe response, some going so far as to advocate the use of tactical nuclear weapons. Despite his rage, Kozak was not suicidal, and had as yet no appetite to go nuclear. He did, however, see opportunity in the moment. With NATO's strike inside Russia, Kozak now had the provocation needed to not only hit the United States, but to do so in a way that would incite maximum fear and disruption on the American public, as to test their political resolve in their continued defense of the Baltics. "They believe the war is still on the other side of the world," said Kozak. "Let's bring it home to them." Born in a room on the outskirts of Moscow, implementation of the attack on America did not utilize bombs or missiles, but instead, a snippet of computer code targeting a critical vulnerability inside software, written decades prior for the US commercial aviation industry. Once in place, the attack's effectiveness simply became a numbers game. At the moment of the cyber attack, more than 2,500 commercial flights were preparing to take to the skies across the US. The malware was not expected to affect them all, the code's designers estimating that based on weather, location, timing, and crew experience, approximately 1% of aircraft would experience the right conditions to cause a catastrophic incident on takeoff. 18 minutes after the code was initiated, Morgan Air Flight 192 was barreling down the runway to its destruction. Less than 1 minute later, Rapid-Jet Flight 326, taking off from El Paso International Airport, slammed into a residential neighborhood near the end of runway 26 left. 2 minutes later, commuters watched in horror as a 737 freighter taking off from the Hilton Head Island Airport crashed into a motel a quarter mile off runway 21. In less than 15 minutes, 10 commercial aircraft crashed upon takeoff at 10 different airports stretching across the southern and western US, killing 523 and injuring 3 times that number. Said one air traffic controller, "As news spread of each new crash, it became pure chaos. We didn't know if there were hijackings. We didn't know if there were bombings. We didn't know squat. We just knew planes were suddenly dropping like flies." At the Tampa International Airport, Clear Skies First Officer Tony Buccieri was the first to identify the cause, that the takeoff settings provided to him in the cockpit sent from the networked flight performance system were wrong. The system wasn't just subtly lying to us, he said. It was doing so in a way to kill us. As he would later testify before Congress, if I had put those settings in as it instructed, based on the temperature, winds, and our weight, we would have run out of runway before getting off the ground. And we wouldn't have known it until we were at rotation speed. And by then, it's just too damn late to stop. As the magnitude of the event became clear, air traffic control centers across the US began declaring ATC 0, shutting down air operations for their sectors. Moments later, FAA National Operations Manager Reggie Jones initiated what was called SCATANA, an emergency plan that included the complete ground stop and ordering of all civilian aircraft to land at the nearest airports. Jones later described the sickness he felt, describing the moment as our September 11th, version 2. Meanwhile, from air bases across the United States, scrambled military aircraft leapt to the sky, ready to fight, but unclear whom to fight or where. For a time, confusion reigned. As social media and news outlets exploded with updates, rumors and false reporting ran rampant. In Washington, D.C., reports of a car bomb near the White House turned out to be a simple car fire, while the sonic booms from scrambled fighters elicited a flurry of 911 calls across the country. By 8:30 p.m., nearly 4 hours from the start of the attack, 4,800 aircraft were safely on the ground, effectively silencing the skies over the United States. But not entirely. High over Pennsylvania, aboard Air Force One, President Dahlman and members of his national security staff plotted options for a withering response, as by then they were aware of both the cause of the attack and, based on intelligence, where the attack likely originated. A nondescript building in downtown Moscow, owned by the Network Security Research Corporation, a company that had but one client, the Russian GRU. The corporation and their numerous cyber attacks had been known to NATO intelligence for years, though counterattacks against them had never been kinetic. Until now. Dahlman, who was at his most quiet when most furious, said little more to his team than to make a firm directive. "I want that building flattened," he said. "I want it hit in broad daylight. I want Kozak to feel the floor shake beneath his feet." It was a tall order. Airstrikes were deemed too risky. Subsonic cruise missiles too likely to be thinned by Russian air defenses. That left one conventional option: hypersonics. 10 hours later, a US Virginia-class submarine in the Barents Sea released a single long-range hypersonic weapon, its very existence only recently publicly disclosed. As before, a message was sent to Moscow announcing that the coming strike was conventional only, even going so far as to naming the target, with the full knowledge there would be little time to react. With the weapon rocketing south at speeds nearing 13,000 miles per hour, and with a plasma cloud before it absorbing radar, the Russian air defense network around Moscow could barely see, let alone target the incoming threat, though dozens of missiles were fired in a Hail Mary attempt. At 9:28 a.m. local time, the weapon struck the 7-story building located in the Presnensky district, just blocks from the Moscow Zoo. In an instant captured on numerous videos, the building was leveled to ruin. As one witness described it, "If I had not heard the screeching sound of the missile coming in, I would have thought it was a demolition project. That's how precisely that building came down." How many were killed was never released, though US intelligence identified 217, of which 48 were military staff. The attack was deemed a success, though many in Washington quietly understood that against Russia's vast and scattered cyber warfare capabilities, the attack was only a setback. No one in the United States, including President Dahlman, felt a sense of satisfaction. There was only anger, and a new, hardened and grim determination to see Russia driven from the Baltics, and Kozak's rule brought to an end. Meanwhile, shaken by the ease of the attack's infiltration and proximity, including the shattering of glass mere steps from his office, President Kozak, pacing in his bunker 200 meters below the Kremlin, waited to be told when he could safely return to the surface. In the next episode, NATO Special Forces attempt a daring rescue as Lithuania teeters on collapse. If you enjoy this series and would like to support it, please send John a YouTube thanks or go to his Flat Circle History Patreon site, where you will get behind-the-scenes access, members-only content, or even have a character named after you. Plus, it will help out John, the solitary dude who makes all these episodes possible. And as always, please like, subscribe, and share this video. And thanks for watching.